I just sound sick. Like, I sound sick. I literally couldn't even tell you what this book was about. Oh yeah, I kind of remember it now. How did I finish reading this book? Like, this did not happen. Hello book lovers, welcome back to the channel. My name is Steph, and in today's video, we will be doing my February Disney Villainous TBR game. If this is the first TBR game that you guys are watching of mine, I will leave the entire playlist linked down below so that you guys can check out all of the previous months. You can also see how we play the game. But this is just my TBR game that I created from one of my favorite things ever, which is Disney. I absolutely love Disney. Playing as the villain is so much fun. As always, I will recap how I did last month, but just know that I was able to read every single book that was on my January TBR, so I will not specifically tell you whether or not I read a book. So just know that I did read every single book on my January TBR, but I will go through all of the rolls that we did from the previous month, and then we will jump right on in to our February TBR game. So to recap January, our first roll was a play a card. The prompt on the play a card was a book that matches the season, and the book that I chose for this was Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. Roll number 2 was a power, so a most anticipated release, and the book I chose for this was All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. Roll number 3 was an activate, so a book that has been on my TBR for the longest, or a book that I have just been like pushing off. And one of my oldest books on my want to read on Goodreads was The Grace Year by Kim Leggett. Roll number 4, we got another play a card. The prompt on this play a card was a new to you author, and the book I chose for this was Feybound by Sarah El Arifi. Roll number 5, we did get a fate, and the randomly selected book from my Goodreads recommendation was Only the Beautiful by Susan Messner. Roll number 6, we did get a random, and the randomly selected book was The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chachki. Roll number 7, squeaking in at the last moment, was a hero battle, and the hero that we were battling was Sergeant Tibbs, and their prompt is a book with 15 letters. The book that I ended up choosing for this was American Rapture by CJ Lead. Spoiler alert, this is definitely going in my top 10 of the year. I absolutely loved this book so much. Roll number 8 was another anticipated release, and the book I chose for this was A Talent for Murder by Peter Swanson. Roll number 9 was another fate, and the book that was randomly selected was Belle of the Ball. And finally, roll number 10, another play a card. This play a card, we did get a graphic novel, so the book that I ended up choosing for this was Something is Killing the Children Volume 6. Again, I was able to read every single book on the TBR, so once I add up all the power from the play cards, so I am going to be adding 1 power for this play card and 2 power for this play card, we will be starting the month of February with 5 power going in. As you guys know, once we hit 20 power, we will be choosing a new villain, but without further ado, let's jump right in to February's TBR, starting with how many rolls we will be doing and roll number 1. Okay, so welcome to February's TBR. We did end on this space right here, so we will be starting here, and we did end the month of January with 5 power. As always, let us roll our 12-sided dice to see how many rolls we will be doing for the month of February. As you guys know, I do get 2 rolls if I do not like the first roll, but I have to stick with the second number if I do decide to go for a second roll. That is a 7, I believe. Yes, that is a 7. So I am definitely going to stick with the 7. Okay, so let's get started with roll number 1, 2, fate. So for roll number 1, we did get a fate, and I am going to be making a slight tweak to the way that I do the fate prompt. So I'm just going to explain it to you guys very quickly. Normally what I do is I take the recommended books from Goodreads. I randomly generate numbers to pick those books, and then from those I put them in a random wheel spinner, and then that basically decides my fate of what book I will be reading. For the most part, I am still going to be doing that, but instead of randomly selecting from the Goodreads recommendations from books I don't own. I am only going to do so for books that I do own. So I will count all of the books that I own in that randomly selected category. Whatever I do own, I will then put into a random number generator, which will generate the books that are going to go into the random wheel spinner. And then I will randomly select them that way. It is still very much random and it is still like determining my fate. The only difference is that I am going to try and pick books that I actually own, because one of my biggest goals for 2025 is to read more owned books. And I feel like with the fate prompt, I usually get books that I don't own because it is just picking books that Goodreads is recommending to me. So now it definitely will give me a higher chance of picking something that I actually own. And if I don't actually own anything in that category, then I will just revert back to what I used to do. I know it probably doesn't really make sense to you, but it makes sense to me in my brain, and it is still random and it is still like determining my fate. So the only difference is I have a very much higher chance of getting a book that I actually own. So in saying that very long explanation, the 4 books that were randomly selected by my Goodreads recommendations were Rouge by Mona Awad, Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark, Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin, and From the Ashes by Jessie Thistle. So I will add the random wheel generator right here, and the book that was selected was Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark. This is a very short book, so I feel like this is a great book to get started for the month. The only thing I know about this is that it is a horror, and it does follow things called Ku Kluxes, which are demons that wear white hoods. I feel like this is going to have a lot of social commentary, and I have heard very mixed things about this, so I am curious to see how I will feel about it. But it does sound like it is going to have a lot of good social commentary, so I am very excited to get into this. Again, it is a shorter book, so also a very good book to kind of get the momentum going for February. Roll number 2, 4, Hero, CD. Roll number 2, it did not take long, but we did get a hero battle, and the hero that we will be battling is Colonel, and they are adding 3 rolls. So we will be adding an additional 3 rolls, and their prompt is CD. So obviously Cruella de Vil, those are her initials. So I decided to throw this prompt into the mix. So I need to find a book that has a first and second word that starts with C and then starts with a D, or an author that also has a first name that starts with a C and ends with a D. So this was actually a really hard prompt to find, but I finally did find a book that the author has the initials CD, and the book that I ended up choosing for this is Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Caitlin Doughty. This is a non-fiction book where she basically answers all of these questions about death, because I believe that she is actually a mortician. So I am actually very, very excited to get into this. I do wish that I owned it because, again, I am trying to read more owned books, but I am just very happy that I was able to find an author that had the initials of CD. Roll number 3, 5, 1 power. Roll number 3, we did get 1 power, so I do get to read an anticipated release, and the book that I am choosing for this is going to be The Lion Women of Tehran by Marjane Kamali. This book I was not super interested in until I watched Kayla's Best Books of the Year video, and she just has like such high praise for this. I do own it, so I am definitely much more excited to read it. Me and Kayla don't typically agree with our tastes, but that mostly applies to like horror and mystery and thrillers, so I am hoping that this one does work for me. This follows the life of a 7-year-old named Ellie, who I believe her father passes away, and her mother have to move to a new neighborhood, and Ellie basically just dreams of having like one really close friend, and then her dreams are answered when she meets her friend named Homa while she starts school, but then their lives are kind of in turmoil because her mother and her are basically afforded the opportunity to go back to the like town in which they were originally from. I feel like this is going to be a very emotional read, and again, I am much more excited now that I've heard Kayla talking about it, so I did want to add this to the list for my anticipated release. Roll number 4, 6, play a card, London. For role number 4, we did get a play-a card, and the prompt on this play-a card is a book that takes place in London, because I'm pretty sure 101 Dalmatians takes place in London. And the book that I am choosing for this is going to be Hunting Prince Dracula by Carrie Maniscalco. I know that the first book takes place in London, and I feel like this one doesn't fully take place in London, but it does start in London, I have heard. So this is the second book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, one series that I definitely want to read and finish this year. I have read book 1, but I feel like I will have to reread that in order to get to this. But I am just, I don't know, sometimes books are just speaking to you and calling to you, and you are just in such a mood for them, and this series is exactly that. I am just in such a mood to read this entire series, to be honest, so I definitely wanted to add this because I am quite sure that it does take place in London. For those of you who do not know, this is book 2, but the first one, Stalking Jack the Ripper, is basically a YA mystery. We do follow our main character, Audrey, who does like to sneak away to her uncle's laboratory to study a lot of gruesome things, but then there are some murders that start happening, and she has to end up solving all of these murders. I remember really enjoying book 1, so I am very excited to continue on with this series, and I'm very curious because my reading tastes have changed on how I'm going to feel about these books in general, because I was talking to, I believe it was Bailey, and she said that they just did not work for her because it was very obvious in book 1, and now that I've read a lot of mysteries, I feel like I can see a lot of things coming, so I'm hoping that that doesn't hinder my enjoyment of the series. Rule number 5. 1. Vanquish. For rule number 5, we did get a Vanquish, so that means I get to read any of my owned books, so I can choose whatever I want from my owned TBR, and the book that I am choosing for this is going to be Love Sickness by Junji Ito. This is Junji Ito's short story collection. He has quite a few, and I have actually heard that a lot of them do kind of intermingle with each other, so there could be some duplicate stories in here. Either way, I am just so excited to jump back in to Junji Ito's style of writing and his artwork, and I am very much excited to dive into this. I also feel like this will also help me break up some of the other books that are going to be on my TBR, but again, this is just a short story collection from the king of horror himself, Junji Ito. Rule number 6. 1. Fate. So for role number 6, we did get another Fate, and the 4 books that were randomly selected from my Goodreads were Page Boy by Elliot Page, Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood, The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, and All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. We'll insert the random wheel spinner right here, and as you guys can see, the book that we will be reading is actually going to be Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I am very excited about this because I have really enjoyed pretty much anything I have read by Ali Hazelwood. I believe the only one I didn't like was Bride, but that is because it is kind of out of what her norm of writing is. This one looks like it is a rivals to lovers romance, and it is also a fake dating trope that is in here. This is part of her women in STEM romance novels that she is writing, and I have really enjoyed the ones that I have read so far, so I am excited to continue on with this one. And finally, our last regular roll number 7. 1. Activate. So for the last of our regular rolls, roll number 7, we did get an Activate. So an Activate is a book that I have been putting off, has been on the TBR for very, very long. Just something that I have been putting off for a long time. I feel like I may regret this because 1, I have not heard any really good things about this book in particular, and 2, it is very, very long, so I'm hoping it doesn't put me in a reading slump. But the book I am selecting for this is The King of Crows by Libba Bray. I am choosing this because I read the other 3 books in this series so long ago, and I just keep pushing this book off. This book has been on my radar for years and years, and I am just so scared to conclude the series because I heard that this one is just not very good. So I thought that this would be the perfect book for the Activate prompt that I got. And this is a book that I do have on my 25 for 2025, so I definitely need to prioritize it. So I did want to add it to my February TBR. For those of you guys who do not know, this this is the last book in the Diviners series. The first book, The Diviners, is like a YA fantasy series where we follow our main character, and it is in the like 1920s in New York City as the backdrop. It is very, very cool. The magic system is very cool, and I highly recommend the first couple of books in this series. I'm really hoping that I do end up enjoying this because sometimes I do have a different opinion than most on books, so I am hoping that that is the case for this one. Now for our first additional roll, roll number 8. 2. Random. Okay, so now on to our regular rolls. Roll number 8, we did get a randomize. So I will insert the clip of me randomly selecting a book from my owned TBR, and I do not want to hear anybody's comments about how many more books I have added to my like need to read and my physical TBR, because I am trying my best, but I just have a book buying problem. Okay, so my current TBR is sitting at 864. And no, I don't want to talk about it. Will not be taking any questions. So 483. Is People Like Her by Ellery Lloyd. And as you guys saw, the book that was randomly selected is People Like Her by Ellery Lloyd. I have read from this author before, and I didn't absolutely love the book that I read, but I did have this book. I believe this one is their debut. The only thing I know about this is it is a like thriller where we are following a mother who begins to become an influencer and then gets a lot of success from being an influencer, but in getting all of this success, her marriage starts to crumble, and she does let in like a very obsessive follower. And I believe that that is like a dangerous person that she starts to kind of like let into her life. So I feel like this is going to get very, very messy. I have not heard too many people talking about this, but I feel like this was part of one of the like book of the month selections maybe back in the day. I got this from the thrift store, so I'm curious to see how I'll feel about this one. But I wasn't a huge fan of this author's other book, but I am willing to give them another try, and I don't really have a choice because this was the book that was randomly selected. Roll number 9. 4. Activate. So for roll number 9, we did get another activate. So again, a book that I have been putting off for a very long time. And the book I chose for this is going to be Wild at Heart by K.A. Tucker. This has been sitting on my want to read on Goodreads for like years. It is probably the longest one that I have on my Goodreads want to read. So I feel like now is the perfect time to put it on there because Activate is all about reading books that I have been putting off. This is the sequel to A Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker, which is actually one of my favorite romance books of all time. I am just like obsessed with the Alaskan backdrop, and that book takes place in Alaska where like our main character moves there after, I believe it's her mother or her dad. I can't remember which one. Like one of them gets very, very sick. So I'm not really sure that this book needed a sequel. I don't know if people have been like loving it. I don't think I will like this one as much as the first one because I just feel like the story like wrapped up in a good way. But nonetheless, I did add this to my want to read years ago, so now I am finally going to get to it. And finally, our last and final roll, roll number 10. 5. Play a card. A reread. And finally, our last and final roll, roll number 10, we did get a play a card, and the prompt on this play a card is a reread. And honestly, I am not making this up, but this actually works out absolutely perfect because I did want to reread Stalking Jack the Ripper so that I can actually get into Hunting Prince Dracula. And what better way than to fulfill this prompt? So I am actually going to be rereading Stalking Jack the Ripper for this prompt, and that couldn't have worked out any better. Again, this is a YA a mystery following a main character that has to like start solving all of these like very gruesome murders that start happening. I do remember really enjoying this, but I don't like 100% remember the entire story. So this reread will be very good to get back into the series. And then I can also read Hunting Prince Dracula. I really did not plan that at all, and that works out so good. So I love when things just kind of come together. Okay, so that is going to be it for my February TBR. I feel like that was just a very short and sweet TBR. I feel like I got a good mix of some thrillers, some romance. I am very much excited to get into my February TBR. We did end February with 6 power after I added up all the power. So we will be going into March with 6 power depending on how many I add from these play cards. Let me know down below in the comments what you guys will be reading in the month of February. That is it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you did make it to the end of this video, leave behind any of the science emojis down below in the comments to let me know that you did. If you did like today's video, I would love it if you hit that thumbs up like button. And as always, if you are new here, I would love to have you stick around. So please hit that subscribe button and I will see you guys all in my next one. Bye.